I am so excited for today's episode of Dualistic Unity Social for a couple reasons. One, I didn't start with "and here we are" because I really am trying to catch that. Just because it's repetitive, not that it matters. I could even ignore it entirely and go, "and here we are" for the rest of fucking eternity, and it would be just fine. But for the sake of mixing it up, create a little fun for myself, I figured I'd try and catch myself. Why the hell not? So I'm excited by that. Firstly, which is kind of funny in terms of the order of priorities for me, I guess. I'm excited, secondly, because it's a roundtable episode today. So that's fucking dope. I love talking to the community. I really enjoy it when people from Patreon can come and join us in an episode and shoot the shit with us, cover whatever is going to be covered, because I always enjoy seeing, I guess, what's being processed by me or by reality, by these people, however you'd like to put it. I enjoy watching the process as a whole. So I'm excited about that. But thirdly, I'm excited about our book. I'm really excited about the fact that we are more than a chapter and a half into it, just fucking moving along with some incredible steam, because of course we've got fucking enthusiasm burning behind us, and we've been talking about this shit forever. So the book is coming along really, really well. The title, of course, is known to our tier 3 supporters. We have not revealed the title publicly. Should we do that today? I don't know. Maybe we'll release it on tier 2 first. We'll release it on tier 2 first, along with the draft of chapter 1, or at least the let's say the first half of chapter 1 should be posted this weekend on Patreon for tier 3, and for tier 3 supporters, and we're going to give the title to tier 2 supporters as of this Sunday. Sunday we have a tier 2 and a tier 3 group, so it's the perfect day. So I'm excited by a bunch of shit. I love writing, and I love it when shit starts to come together in a nice flow. This book is going to be awesome.
It's so good so far. Even just the setup and the outline gonna go, and it's exciting. It's really, really exciting because I think it's gonna hit home for literally anyone. There's not like a demographic that it's gonna be for. And part of me like really, really wants to say the title, but I'm not going to, because it adds some little bit of flair to it. So yeah, excited to chat here. I was just dealing with I'm at my grandma's for a bit looking for apartments, and was dealing with, she's a feral cat that she let in for a while, but she's not here right now. And last time she let it in, after a while, it peed all over her bed. So I can't let it in, and it's staring at me through this window here, just meowing. It's brutal. I want so badly to be able to, but it's getting its food every day. And that's okay. But I did the other thing I wanted to say, I did some Qigong thing this morning. Actually, the one that Ben sent through, the morning exercise, was like 10 minutes. And I hadn't really noticed, and I got like a pull-up bar here. So I've been doing hanging, just like hanging from it for an extended period of time. And my shoulders have always been really fucked up. Like, I've dislocated them a couple times each. And there was an exercise basically. Here, let's see if I can. And you're standing and just kind of like straight back and swaying from side to side, and just letting, like, not moving your arms, but just letting them hang from your shoulder. Take it, and I noticed how much tension there is in my shoulders in general, and like dropping it so that it's completely like there isn't anything holding on, like it's just holding on itself, like I'm not doing something to hold it on, is a very strange feeling. It almost feels like they're both about to be dislocated in a sense, but it's so, and then that hit me, and I was like, oh fuck, I wonder what other parts of my body. So I stood over the stairs with my leg and kind of did the same thing for my hip, and just let them hang there. And it was like a whole new feeling to me, because it was like in those joints, kind of letting them go and relaxing inside of them, which I feel like maybe I've never done. I've done at points, but there's been like a sort of a whole looseness of my body today, and it's kind of trippy a little bit when you're doing it.
It's funny because I've actually joked to myself previously that the only thing keeping me up at this point is the tension. And it's just because we're so used to tensing our way through life that we don't, spend that time to just loosen up and do all that. I know the first time that I got that lesson was when I started Wing Chun. Actually, I was about a year and a half into it, and I thought I was learning the center punch pretty well. And then somebody explained, like, you are super rigid, like you're driving it with your muscles instead of just flicking it out there. And it's because you're afraid of the elbow dislocating, right? Like you throw it out there and you can actually feel it kind of pull at the joint when it's really flying, and you pull back reflexively, like you tense up your arm in order to not feel that elbow almost feel like it's going to dislocate. And it's not going to dislocate at all, but there's fear there. And of course, because you're always tensing it, you're also not training that joint, right, to actually be as elastic as it could be. And so it's just, I was just like, Jesus, where else am I holding on like that? Where else am I like tensing up where I could be a little bit more elastic? And this is why it's so funny, because through all of our conversations on the podcast, we have a podcast, by the way, for anybody who's watching this right now. Out of all of our conversations on the podcast, I've said one of the best things I can pass on to you, regardless of how many insights and worldly, universal, fucking weird shit that we've gotten into, stretch. Stretch and keep fucking stretching. Absolutely. Exercise, get stronger, do all that, but stretch. It's just that so often we want to get stronger for the sake of feeling more confident. We want to feel like we can battle off life a little bit more. We want to feel like we look a certain way. It's very few people who look at you and go, wow, you look really flexible. It's not one of those things that you typically are looking for in terms of a compliment, where somebody's like, wow, you look really buff. You're like, yeah, I do. And so people tend to focus on that a little bit more. But there's also just the fear factor, right? Just when I'm afraid, I want to get strong. I want to push back. It's the first thing we learn in martial arts, is that a fear response is to shove. Like as soon as somebody puts pressure on you, you shove with all your strength because you're afraid, and that's your immediate instinct. And it's trying to train that out, right? Unless, of course, you're the person being attacked, in which case you're like, hey, I'm going to use this to my advantage.
Oh, dude, Wing Chun's gonna be so good for me. Like, I was actually thinking about it a little bit this morning, and just how much, like, it really perspective. Like, if we live a relatively comfortable life and don't get into situations where there is potential for a blowback, like, you know, in Wing Chun, getting hit, and there's like a not paying attention, to not being focused, to being lost in your head or whatever. And so I'm very excited and equally as uncomfortable and afraid. But it's going to be really good for me. So I have yeah, I have two places I'm going to try and see this week, to get in new apartments. And yeah, once I'm there, like hopefully next week I get started. But it's so funny. Just all week, the last 2 weeks, we were talking about last week too, just with, for me, I mean, for me, talking about like just having unnecessary, like working out to strictly to look a certain way. It's strictly aesthetic. Like as much as you can contort it and be like, oh no, I'm getting stronger. So that blah blah blah. And there is the bone density thing. I'll give weightlifting that, but outside of that, there's sort of this facade like game I would play with myself, convincing myself that it's not just an entirely egotistical sort of thing. And like it was like the whole time, and it was just such a habitual thing that it very much became myself. And there have been different points throughout my life where I've gotten like, bigger or more cut or more lean, but it was always, there was a good bit of attention being paid to just like fucking how I looked in general. Like it was a priority. And so I made interesting too, because I was thinking about this this morning, kind of along the lines of that tennis ball video you posted about. And I did want to talk about that also, but just how often people are showing you themselves without them realizing it. And like just look at the way, like, someone tells you exactly how they spend their day or their week. And like that kind of tells you everything about how they see themselves, how that where their priorities are. Like it tells you so much more. And we think we're like gatekeeping our mind and our priorities and our thoughts and stuff. And it's like we're all kind of out in the open like that. We're all in what we're concerned about, how we so many of the things like as a society we've pitched as like good habits, healthy habits are just like things to buffer insecurity or just in response to insecurity. And I'm just speaking from my own experience and a lot of the things that I've done in ways that I've done things and like reasons that I felt about something was just how I thought it made me look or seem to someone or something else, and that was where the good feelings came from as opposed to actually being involved in what I'm doing. Like it's so fucking super in so many fucking ways. But yeah, the stretching stuff. I've been doing that instead of the lifting stuff recently. I'm like, holy fuck. I was just blowing through all of this shit in my body with no regard for like how do I actually feel right now. And I feel like I'm just finally starting to feel it. And I'm noticing just like how my a little more because I have way more tension up here than on my back because like my back was probably relatively a little bit more neglected than chest, biceps, shoulder, forward shoulder. So I've been doing like primarily just I said I got that pull-up bar and just doing that sort of stuff and just to even this out because it's a fucking idea basically until very recently.
Yeah, it's interesting. Learning a martial art will definitely change your priorities. Actually, it was really well communicated in Fight Club. Oddly enough, it's like we had a new reason to keep our hair short and our fingernails trimmed. It's like all of a sudden it's not about looking good. It's about the functionality of the fact that somebody's just going to reef on your hair, right? Or you may pull back a nail or something like that. Like there's a lot of things to consider. What's interesting is Wing Chun. It's bone density is not a thing you have to worry about. And it's just because we do all that conditioning exercises, bone on bone. We're always practicing against the wooden dummy, which is solid oak. And so what you're doing is you're getting microfractures in the bone, and then those microfractures calcify, and so they become thicker over top. And so the bone actually ends up becoming broken a little bit at a time, but then it calcifies over top and it becomes more and it becomes stronger and stronger, which is why Wing Chun guys typically have really good bone density right into their 80s and 90s. It's because you're always making contact. The other thing I thought was really interesting is that when you keep hitting a part of the skin over and over and over again, that part of the skin actually starts to get thicker over time. The body adapts. And so as you're training your arms or you're training your legs or you're just getting hit as a whole, your body's adapting to being hit. Your body is adapting to that pressure, which is incredible because it's another example of just push through. You are a learning machine. I wanted to mention quickly because somebody asked if we have any intention of doing a retreat in Australia. It's going to be a little while, and the reason it's going to be a little while is because, frankly, we don't have a huge following in Australia. We do have a good following in Australia. I just wanted to say hello, all our people in Australia. We really appreciate you being there and supporting us. And it is relatively expensive to get down to Australia, considering it would have to be Andrew and myself at the bare minimum. So it's going to take a little bit of planning to make the Australia thing happen. And I know because we just made the Netherlands thing happen, and that took a lot of planning. And we were still more or less just flying by the seat of our pants, and we wouldn't have it any other way. I just wanted to throw that out there. But we do have some mini retreats coming up. We've got a mini retreat coming up February 1st in Virginia Beach. And I'm excited to say that there are only bunk beds left. Bunk beds, by far, I think, are the coolest fucking part of these retreats if you like the sleepover vibe, I guess is what I'm saying. And actually, it's funny because this time, Andrew, you and I have a bunk bed, which is great because ordinarily it's 2 single beds and we're sharing the space, but now we have even less space, and I have to tolerate you sleeping above me. No, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's just that you know how it goes with bunk beds. You end up talking into the middle of the night and giggling and doing all that. And considering the retreats often feature getting high, there's a lot of giggling involved and no shortage of munchies. So I'm just throwing that out there. If anybody would like to join us in Virginia Beach, there are some tickets available. And what's nice is because they're shared rooms, the tickets are actually relatively inexpensive. It's only $1,400, but if you are a Patreon supporter, you get a $50, $150, or a $350 discount on that, which means that all your food, all your substances, all your expenses, pretty much the entire weekend is covered with that ticket. So if you would like to join us, we would love to see you. These retreats are amazing. And if you want to know how amazing, then I highly encourage you to join our community Discord, go to the retreat plans or just the general thread and ask people, hey, what's the retreat like? Or just ask somebody here in the comments section, because more than likely somebody is from the retreat is watching this right now. It speaks for itself. It's incredible. I feel grateful and appreciative just to be a part of it, frankly, because it's not us that's doing it. It really is the people who come to the retreat and their willingness to question themselves and be authentic and be vulnerable and empathize. It's fucking magical to watch, because it's like watching intelligence in motion. And that's really what it is. Our collective intelligence clearly fucking doing its thing, because we're not in the way, mucking up the works with our preferences. We spend the entire time just kind of relaxing, getting out of the way, and marveling at how much of a transformative experience that alone is. So if you want to ask people, check out the community Discord. That's a great place to be.
Fuck yes, I'm very excited for that one. And feel free to shoot me a DM if you got questions about the retreat. But also, I posted a video. Sorry to know if I've ever actually lived for myself. And that one, it's like the second or third video on my account. There's a bunch of people tagged in there. Those are all people who have been to retreats in the past. So like, feel free to message them as well. If you go to that video, it says 20 people tagged, only because that's the max amount of people. So if you or I wasn't able to, that's why, because it hit a max. But yeah, feel free to message those people, because as great as it is, for us to talk about it, and if you got questions, we're happy to answer. It can be helpful to hear from someone else. So yeah, definitely do your best to get there. It's going to be a great time. And yeah, we're pretty much high the whole time, and a little bit of microdosing. And I'm always hesitant to like bring up other stuff, just like in case platforms watching us, but we're not on TikTok right now, and they're usually the ones who are pretty annoying about that stuff. So I think we're
yeah, they're more than a little uptight about it, whereas Instagram doesn't seem to give too much of a fuck, which is nice. I want to say that there was actually somebody in the comments section on the Dualistic Unity thread that was saying it's worth every penny, and so I just wanted to throw out, thanks, Mark. I appreciate that, man. I'm really looking forward to seeing you again. One more announcement. We have a roundtable episode after this. I don't know if I covered that already, but we have a roundtable. I did cover that already. If you are not part of the roundtables and you're not part of Patreon, this is probably one of my favorite parts of Patreon. Not only is Patreon a chance for you to express your growth, talk to other people going through the same stuff, empathize, relate, do all of that. You can also shoot the shit with us on an episode every 2 weeks. It's called a roundtable. We've been doing this for over a year now, I think. We're up to roundtable 28. 29, and we do it pretty much every 2 weeks. So it's a great chance for you to introduce yourself to other people, to share an insight, to share a story that has helped you, perhaps, or just to express yourself and to shoot the shit with us. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy the roundtables, the groups as well. It's funny because we were talking about this the other day in our live stream. It's so much fun to be able to go back and look at our own progress in terms of going to episode 1, September 2021. All of a sudden 300 plus episodes were here, and we go back and we look at those episodes and we're like, oh wow, is there ever a difference in just how we express ourselves? Like, the words might be very similar, but how they're expressed is very different. And one of the things that we were saying about Patreon, about these groups is the fact that everybody who's on Patreon has the ability to do the same, because we record and then repost all of the group discussions on Patreon, but never in public. So people who have been on Patreon for 2 years have 2 years worth of their group videos to go back and look at what they were saying and what they were working with and what they got through. Right. And if you haven't been a Patreon supporter for quite some time, then you can just come back in and go back and check when you are ready to do so. It's a vault for your progress, for your change. I just fucking love that, because there's thousands, like there's over 1,000 hours of groups in there easily. And I know because I'm posting these things every day. So anybody who hasn't joined us on Patreon, definitely join us. And then you can join us on the roundtable today. There's also a free 7-day trial.
You can join for free and hop into that episode, because they're a lot of fun. And yeah, I like that, because we didn't think about that, or I didn't think about that until yesterday when we were talking about how everyone has that vault on Patreon. Like we were referencing how it's cool to see that, we have the podcast. It's been 2 years, and then I have my podcast. You've had content for 20 years that you can go back to, and the whole time, like, a lot of the words aren't really changing much at all. It's just how it's brought across, how it. That's just what I'm saying. And so I was kind of thinking about this today, just how, like, there's a lot of people out there, like comedians, for example, who very much seem to be, being themselves, and that, I think, is one of almost the extremes of just being able to have faith in yourself, and like on telling a joke. It's like there's immediate feedback as to what people thought of something like that. And so just how, like, everyone kind of exists on a spectrum of like how seriously they take themselves, and usually how enjoyable your life tends to be is almost equatable to how seriously or how not seriously you take yourself, one way or the other. It's on a spectrum. So like the less seriously you take yourself, the more enjoyable your life can be for you, like almost by default, because things don't hit in the same way. But if you take yourself very, very, very seriously, either you're going to be petrified or you're going to be super rigid. Rigidity in like in not letting things hit, or trying not to let things hit, or you're trying things, and because you're taking yourself so seriously, you respond a lot or hit really hard. And so I was kind of thinking of it like how some people grow up and just maybe naturally have more faith in themselves, but still, you know, think about themselves and just be super confident in themselves. But I'm wondering, like, can you really like not take yourself seriously at all and still maintain like a solid perspective of yourself? Or am I just seeing someone who maybe is making a solid idea of themselves, not taking themselves as seriously as like maybe they take themselves seriously in other ways? And so I was just thinking about like how that plays out, and not thinking about yourself conceptually so much. You can like still take yourself seriously with that, or you can not take yourself seriously and still maintain more of a conceptual idea of yourself, and like how much, I don't know, like how those work together, I guess.
I'm not sure how to answer this.
Yeah, I don't even know if that was a fucking question, dude. I'm just like, these are some thoughts. I don't
Yeah,
know. What
it's
are your thoughts?
interesting, because I mean, you can go a little bit, you can go too far one way or another, or rather, you can misinterpret it one way or another. And what's interesting is talking to other people. You have no idea what whether how seriously they're taking themselves until things go to shit. So if you're talking to somebody who's super comfortable, you don't know how seriously they take themselves. Because they don't know how seriously they take themselves. They don't have any reason to worry about it because they're not thinking about it. Right. But that's dependent on comfort. That's dependent on control. That's dependent on conditions, everything going exactly the way that they like. And so until that person is significantly rattled, you're never really going to know, and neither are they, how seriously they take themselves. But I think that's the point: is if you really want to look for how seriously somebody takes themselves, if it's overboard, look at the fear. Look at how much of their life is very much in avoidance of something else. Like for example, entrepreneurialism is really interesting because if you go into it afraid that you're not going to succeed, more than likely you're going to give up. Right. Whereas if you're willing to fail, if you're willing to do it the hard way, if you're willing to face poverty, if you're willing to do all that, chances are you're going to make it. And it's more or less just because you're willing to go through it. You're not running away from it, right? But to do that, you need to not take yourself so seriously, right? That doesn't mean you're not taking yourself seriously. It means you're not taking how things impact your idea of yourself seriously, right? You're taking each and every step seriously. You're paying attention to it, but you're not thinking to yourself, well, shit, that sale didn't go through. Therefore, I'm a piece of shit and this is never going to work. And you see, immediately you're establishing control that isn't really there, right? Because you don't know any of that. What you do know is you didn't make the sale. What you can do is look at, why. If you want to, just look at the feedback or the response. But then on the other hand, don't be too quick to use that feedback for judgment on yourself, because as you know, not everybody is going to be your demographic. Not everybody's going to be that sale, and that's okay. Not everybody's going to resonate with you, and that's okay too. I'm just going on that tear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess to that point, like you never really know what someone's comfort zone is also. Like someone could seem like they're doing great, but it's just because they've stayed in a bubble, and like as soon as something else is put in front of them, like all of a sudden it comes out, or like where they're at comes out. And you see it in cannabis too. Like that's just something like that could be outside of its zone, and so it's just avoided, and so then like the trade-off is living a very life sheltered life, because she's shapes and forms, like not jumping into new things. And so a lot of that, I think, just you are to jump into new things, because something new, I guess there's dependent upon how new it is relative to like where you're at. And so like something that seems super new and like entirely different than something you're used to there's gonna be maybe more hesitation than something that's new but like relatively close to what you've done, like you know playing baseball and trying softball. It's like, yeah, it's new, but like, not really. Certain ways it's new, but not really. But like jumping into something entirely new, that's the case. And again, it's funny, like even just talking about people in general or like society in general, like sometimes I feel like a fucking like not like a fraud, but just like why am I talking about general society? Like I have all my own shit I'm dealing with and going through, and willing to jump into, not willing to jump into, a little more hesitant here, a little bit less hesitant here. And like that's all I know. And it's kind of funny how I guess with the world society, like it comes down to recognition, and like you can recognize and talk about certain things, but it's interesting how quick we can be to talk about, and again, how quick I can be to talk about, something in general or like a general assumption. And despite myself not being, necessarily super relaxed or being super tense in certain ways or not feeling free in myself, but then it's like I'll spend time talking about one or something else, or even sharing something. And that hit, and like I let that one slide this morning too, because I'm like, sometimes I feel like a fraud, even just sharing a perspective, But again, it's like coming from me. It's coming from, and I've been more willing, I guess, to realize how many of the things I talk about are just like my own stuff that I'm all the time. And that's always been the case. But there's been, I don't know, a gravitation away from being willing to admit I still got that shit. It was like, here's something to help you. It's like, something that I'm going through and dealing with. And I guess there's, I don't know, it's like some humility with that. And like I've been humbled so fucking much this last year. But yeah, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, humility is always good, but on the same token, I mean, it's not so much about what you're saying so much as what you're doing, which is expressing who you are and what you are. And in that capacity, I mean, you can look at anything in nature and just look at the fact that like, it can't judge itself for being unique. Like a single flower doesn't judge itself according to all the other flowers based on its smell, right? It's expressing itself to the best of its ability, and that's it. It's like, oh, but I'm not like, maybe I shouldn't be, I have fucking, imposter syndrome. Maybe I'm not the right kind of flower. It's like, my smell's not exactly correct, and it's like, yeah, but it's yours, and so you're a part of the whole, and so you're just doing what you're doing, and I think the important part there is the humility, the recognition that you can only speak from your own experience, but that it's not the details of the experience that bind us together. It's not the details of your life that make you able to empathize with somebody who has a very different life. It's the underlying messages, the underlying emotions, the underlying feelings, and the underlying temptation to identify with any of those things that we can relate to with each other. The events are different, right? But underlying is the experience of existence, the experience of a dualistic mind, the experience of the fiction of identity, and the assumption of other people's identity. These are all things that we can relate to because they're all things that we experience. How we experience them is different. Somebody might have learned that working on a ranch. Somebody might have learned that working in an office. Somebody might have learned that, digging gold by hand out of a river. Like somebody may have learned this somewhere else, but the point is that the lessons are always there. The lessons about our emotions, about our experience, about our existence, they're always there. They are underlying, but they're simplistic because they have to scale out into all of these different experiences. But underlyingly, we are the same. And so as long as we stick to that, we're not out there saying, you're going to experience this and this and this and this, but rather this is a part of our experience. This is a part of our existence. And from what we can tell, this is kind of what we're all going through. And we're leaving it up to the other people to go, yeah, I am going through that. It's exactly what I'm going through. And if they're not going through that, then let's talk about that, because I love to pick shit apart. But that's what's happened over 20 years of just picking shit apart, is that there's a root. There's a root to all of this. And when we start talking about it, we start realizing that we share that root. That the danger of identification, the danger of thinking about ourselves overly much, the danger of investing in the illusion of control is the same for all of us. For all of us, the consequences are in fact the same, regardless of the variance in the details.
All said. Yeah, and that's why, when you do start wondering about stuff, or questioning stuff, or being willing to just not be so sure of all the things, not just like the thoughts that you're having, but the actions that you're taking, like it comes, there is a basic sort of recognition that starts to come to fruition that's almost inevitable as someone is just willing to be curious and not hold on to answers necessarily. And oh man, so I don't know how much time we got, but like I did want at some point talk about that tennis ball video that you posted more recently, and So maybe we can like.
I figured as much. The round table might be a good place to do that, assuming that everybody who's on the round table saw the video. But I know currently the people who have signed up for the round table did see the video, as far as I know. Alternatively, maybe we'll just play it in the round table. But yeah, we can get into it for sure, because I figured it would stir your interest. And if we don't get into the round table, we have a Patreon call after the roundtable today, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This is our late night Patreon call. Tier 2 or Tier 3 can join us. Again, we have free trials available. So Patreon call is where you get to chat with us and the rest of the community for like an hour and a half. Last announcement, actually, we got about 7 minutes left. We have an upcoming research and information literacy workshop coming up this Friday and Saturday. If you can make it and you would like to learn the secrets to research and information literacy. And really, that's just getting out of your own fucking way. That's really all it is understanding that you are not as hindered as you might think. All you need is a little resilience and the willingness to have an open mind, and you can learn anything you want, time and attention. So if you doubt your research abilities, if you doubt your ability to go and find answers for yourself without getting, swayed down a rabbit hole, then definitely check out this workshop. It's going to be awesome.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to that. I had some questions on Instagram on my side. When's your next retreat again? February 1st to February 5th in Virginia Beach. Tickets are with all the max discounts you can have are very, very, very inexpensive, like as inexpensive as of a ticket as you can pretty much get. And they're all bunk beds, so it'll be a lot of fun for sure. And then I had another one. Is anyone else getting intrusive thoughts about CIA following you? I feel like I watch too many movies. So it's funny. Actually, I had a thought like just an hour ago, where I was like, kind of hit me, or there was all of a sudden a wave of like my life could be almost like a Truman Show type vibe. And it's funny because like that can pop up, and there isn't a way for me to confirm one way or another. And that's kind of trippy and kind of like uncomfortable, but also kind of exciting that like I don't know. Like I could be just walking on the back of a gigantic dog right now. Like all those things are will end. Yeah, this is something else that was hitting just how much distance. Maybe it was in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They were talking about distance between a planet, and this is like kind of irrelevant to the book. It was just a one sentence where it was talking about just distance, like mileage from one planet to another, and how much we think about things relatively like distance, and it's always relative to how I see myself. Like 100 miles is really far for someone who's approximately 7 feet tall. But for the Earth, if the Earth was like 100 miles, that's really short. And like the Earth and mileage isn't really a thing. Like it's a tool that we use to measure kind of like seconds, right? And so relatively for me, it's like the tennis ball thing you were showing. This isn't really, I guess, semi-relevant to that video a little bit, but how on that like 100 miles to the Earth is a little tiny millimeter of a millimeter or whatever that is to the tennis ball, and so there's not really even like hard and fast distance type things, 'cause it's all going to be relative to how I see myself. And so when you span it out, it's like, the distance between the Earth and the moon, or the Earth and the sun, or all of that is just a distance. And I don't really, know if this like is even like making sense. Is just like it's all like all distance is relative, and I think we've talked about that before. But just how funny it is that it's relative to how I see myself all the time. And so like everything's going to be on some sort of scale. And it just brings into play, I think, more what I was thinking about was like how uncertain, you know, the edges of things are. And, you know, am I looking outside of my mind or am I looking inside of my mind? Because that then, you know, kind of comes full circle to the distance thing in a way.
Isn't duality fun? Isn't it? Because that's exactly what we're talking about, is all the different perceptions within a dualistic experience, right? It's you versus this thing, but it's always, you know, a spectrum, which is always relative to another spectrum, relative to another spectrum. This is something that we were saying in the Tao Te Ching, is that something small always has something smaller, and something large always has something larger. You know, there will always be a large and a small, regardless of the context. You know, you could be 2 inches tall, you know, and there's always going to be smaller than you or larger than you. And so they're always trying to say, like, you know, this is part of our existence. This is what it is. You know, but back to the question of subjectivity, the question of, you know, are we in the universe, or is it in us? And of course, the answer there being both and neither. Um, it's fucked up. Like, it's really interesting, because even our experience of time, you know, it isn't linear. It's not the conceptual thing that we think it is. I mean, even when you're like, you know, how far is it to the sun? When? Like, at which exact moment? Because it's not like we're going in equal the distance around the sun all the time. You know, even our ellipse changes, right? So I mean, it's really interesting. But then again, our experience of speed and time and distance changes accordingly to a number of things. You know, like the fact that the faster, where the closer we get to the speed of light, the more time slows down. You know, that fucks with me. That one still baffles my mind, is how time works as a whole. I wanted to just say very quickly, I'll throw it up one more time. We have our own personalized GPT, the Dualistic Unity Life Troubleshooter, otherwise known as Eon Lightfoot, is now available to anybody with a Chat GPT account. This thing is trained to our podcast, the first 4 seasons of our podcast, in fact, and it's had a number of customizations due to Andrew and I just fucking around with it, and of course some community feedback. We would like more feedback. If you can check it out, go try it out. Ask it a question. It's meant to be just a useful guide for you to simplify existence, and so we would love to hear how it went for you. If you get some kind of a janky answer that you're like, I don't think you guys would say this, do definitely let us know, because at the moment I am impressed. I've been testing this thing a lot, and I am impressed.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to use. It's really cool to, because on a typical, on just chat answers that are just very vague, or they don't really, especially for like, you know, more existential stuff, you can have a lot of fun with this, is what I'm saying. But it's yeah, so definitely check that out. Coming up in about 16 minutes. Get everyone for hopping onto the roundtable for those. And if you're on tier 2 and you're watching this, or tier 3 and you haven't been on a roundtable yet, hop in there. Get in there. You don't even have to come with any prepared sort of things. I will definitely not be prepared, and I'll probably get a little bit more baked beforehand, and see, because yeah, I'm excited for that, and I know we're so fast right quick, and then
Last thing, we still have a video contest. If you would like to make a video about dualistic unity, and about what you've learned through dualistic unity, some experiences you've had at the retreat, or on the Discord, or in the groups, or if you just want to take your favorite clip and release it onto social media, if that video gets the most views by our Virginia Beach retreat, so as of February 1st, you will win a free ticket to our California mini retreat. California mini retreat is going to sell out fast. 2 tickets actually just sold out in the last 24 hours. So definitely keep your eye out for opportunities to join us there. April 11th, we're going to be by Big Bear Lake in California. It's going to be amazing. And that is it for today. I'm going to go get high, and we will see you on the roundtable.